Thank you so much for joining us on It's Time today. We are your hosts. I'm Linsly Donnelly, your citizen scientist and your longevity expert for midlife women.
And I'm Dr. Jen Wagner, physician and holistic performance expert. Welcome to It's Time, powered by Prosper. Hey, everybody, welcome back to It's Time. Linsly and I are so excited to introduce you to our guests today. And we are going to talk about things from a little bit different angle than what we cover most of the time. So we are so excited to have Leila Entezam with us today. She is a neuroemotional performance coach specifically for men. So go ahead, Leila.
The coaching is not specifically for men. The book is targeted.
The book is okay. So this is her awesome book that we'll share, and we're going to get into in a little bit later. I had the opportunity to meet Leila at Wharton when I was giving a talk at their neuroscience summit, and just found that her coaching practice was so interesting and her approach. And then she wrote this book that is just fantastic about really the emotional mastery for men in leadership. We wanted to kind of broaden that conversation a little bit to say, how do we continue to have these conversations maybe with our male partners? And what do we need to be working with our sons about growing up having this skill set and why it's important? So welcome, and we're so excited that you're joining us today.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, Jennifer Linsly. I really appreciate that. And yeah, it was so intriguing to me, Jennifer, when I met you at Wharton and heard your talk. And it was like the things I say about men, and you were saying them about women and the high performers and some of the intricacies. And I was like, oh my God, I have to talk to her. And so we connected, and I'm glad that we did. Yeah, I think if there's a couple places I would suggest starting the conversation, it would be around, and I even touch on this in my book, and I love the fact that you touched on our young men and boys, is that at that early age, I think a lot of times you can identify high performers in some of the ways you think that you can, that, they are just excelling in things. But a lot of high performers, in particular, like ultra high performers, the ones that either, maybe come from traumatic backgrounds, the ones that have environments that create emotional avoidance early on, avoidant attachment theories early on, they may not be as obvious. They may act out, but it's because they're bored. They may be emotionally seem very triggered or have tempers or things like that, but it's because they're just more emotionally sensitive.
Interesting.
So there's these other things that you can start to look for in that younger age. And then also the idea of, from an early age, whether they are high performers or not, the emotional attunement, the allowing children to feel seen, knowing it's safe to have emotions, knowing that compartmentalization is actually not a thing.
Yeah.
And so increasing their language and vocabulary around emotions. And you build the soil, the fertile soil that then allows them to develop their emotional muscles more effectively. Those men go on to become leaders and partners, and now are doing so in that, as I said, more fertile emotional soil.
Yeah. So if we think a little bit about, because we're talking a lot with midlife women, which means they probably have someone between the age of 12 to 25 as a child. How do you introduce the top three messages that you think are empowering to young men and boys? How would you introduce this and intercept kind of in those high school, college years to orient them? I mean, they're seeing a lot of the words out there. They're much probably more aware of emotional literacy than our cohort of boys were. But I am trying to envision with my 15-year-old son and my 19-year-old son, like, what would I be trying to impart and how would I start the conversation?
Well, I would say before you even start the conversation, start with yourself of what's your own emotional literacy, your own comfort with emotions, your own willingness to step into emotions and vulnerability and that difficult work. Because if you can't take someone else somewhere you haven't been or aren't willing to go. And so if you try to open that door with children and you aren't willing to do it, then you stumble through it, and it's not that you have to do it perfectly, but then it's like, hey mom, what was the point of that if you're trying to get us to open up or whatever, and that's not even something that you model for us.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think one, it would be to start with your own self and doing your own work, your own self-awareness that allows you to then grow your awareness of others. The next thing I would say is language around emotions, of having emotions, recognizing emotions. It's that it's okay to experience emotions. Allowing yourself to have that doesn't mean that you are compromising your ability to perform or to fit in. Growing your empathy muscles, things like that. So I think start with yourself, and then the language around emotions, and then the consistency, continuing that language so that it continues to get reinforced. And that it's not just the, hey, when you're having a bad day or when you're falling apart. Maybe it's about a news story. Hey, what do you imagine it's like for them? Maybe it's about something that happened at school. Maybe it's about the homeless person you see on the corner. And weaving that into everyday life.
Makes sense.
I think that's so interesting because I was I was at a business summit about 3 weeks ago in New York, and there was a segment on kind of young men in this country right now and kind of what a perilous position they're in with all of this influence that is coming at them, that is almost the antithesis of what we're talking about today, right? It is. And so strategies, like you said, I guess I worry about that in a world that is saying you don't need any of this. You can, you don't have to not even follow these rules, but have these discussions. You can just go do this. Are you seeing, I mean, this is what scares me, I guess. Are you seeing that in those attitudes in the workplaces and leaders taking place, that just the rules are engagement of changing, and if your work has ever been needed, it is needed right now. But what do you see changing in these environments, and how do we combat that?
Do you mind if I actually answer that question with respect to intimate relationships?
Perfect.
So the reason why is because this is just so pulling on my heartstrings in the last couple weeks in so many arenas, personally and professionally around me. I can't tell you how many conversations I'm in that are around this dichotomy and this situation that men 30s are stuck in, from my experience and personally, professionally, conversations I'm having, with friends and colleagues and clients, that there is this place where, hey, there's this part of me that is talking about being vulnerable. And then there's this part of me that is, expecting me to perform. And then there's this part of me in partnership that is like, hey, these traditional values and the woman to take care of me and me to take care of a woman or whatever. And then there's a part of me that says, hey, but how much money are you bringing to the table? And then there's a part of me that, and so they are like swimming in this confusion of like, hey, I don't even know, what I'm supposed to want, or what's the right answer, or what kind of partner. And then that gets projected onto the partner that they're with, and that creates challenges there. And then the partner is like, if you don't know what you want, which one of these tunes should I dance to? Should I make a nice home, or should I go, work 12 hours and, or earn enough money? But if I'm working hard to earn enough money, hey, I'm not suddenly building the home that you want. And so there's, I worry about the state of these partnerships and intimate relationships. And in particular, I worry about it for these high performing men, because this population of high performers, in particular, high performing avoidance men, that they don't have a lot of these anchor relationships. And so if they have a partner, a lot of times that person holds a lot of weight for them, which means that it's an outsized impact. So you've got a person that sits in an influential position, you have an intimate relationship that is very significant to them, and however that is going to get projected onto however they lead, however they live, however they love, and that has a domino effect. And so this complicated confusion of thoughts and emotions that they're all trying to navigate is what's keeping me up at night right now.
Yeah. Gosh, I think so. As we have partners that are men, for those of us that do, what advice, like, how can we be, I guess, I don't even know if supportive is the right word, but how can we help them, I guess, supportive in the way that, like, to unpack and to facilitate these conversations that I think are really difficult, right? I think I can speak from my own relationship that the world is a super stressful place, and I have seen stress in my partner um that I haven't seen before. And it's, and I can't pinpoint it to one particular thing, but I think he does feel a lot of these pressures, even though, like, our balance and relationship hasn't changed at all. But I sometimes am a little lost about, I don't know how to help you through this. Partly because you don't really know how to talk to me about what you're feeling, because you've never been in this environment before. Do you have any suggestions about how we even start to bring these topics to light, to let them know, gosh, this is a really, I think as women, I mean, this is a very long-winded way to ask this question. I think as women, we're so used to being in these environments, right? The world has worked against us for a really, really long time, and we've had to fight these battles. And so we're pretty good at it, right? We're pretty good at kind of digging in and getting through it and connecting with others and kind of finding our way. And I think men are now being exposed to some of this, that this is the way to do it. And I don't want to do it that way. I don't identify with some of the characteristics of the people that are leading right now. And because of that, I feel a little lost, and I'm really frustrated and angry by it, but I don't quite know how to handle that. And I don't know how to handle that as, like, the supporter partner. Like, how do you continue to find yourself? So sorry, that was a really confusing way to ask that question, but what advice do you have for us who are trying to help them navigate this situation?
I think a couple things. The first thing I would say is the willingness to treat your relationship with intentionality, that actively rather than passively. So the willingness to have check-ins, to see what the relationship requires, to give it the time and attention and bandwidth, rather than just the hey, with whatever's left at the end of the day. If there's anything left, then the relationship can get something. That's easier said than done, but I really believe that it is part of this idea of, like, put the mask on for yourself first before other people. The relationship is the self first before other people, because the more solid that is, again, in particular in high performer relationships that don't have big circles of trust, then the people that they do have have that outsized impact I was mentioning, that in particular for those people, that making the relationship this active space. And the other thing I would say is, in particular for women, I was actually just having this conversation recently, the tendency, there's something I have in my book called the lab triangle. It's love, agency, and boundary. And so love is my care for you and your care for me. Agency is the opportunity for me to act with agency and for you to do the same. And boundary is me holding my own boundaries and honoring yours. And I think keeping that triangle in your awareness, so that it is, hey, I'm going to give you the love and support that I have and that I can, while also the agency to, hey, I'm not forcing anything on you, and maintaining my own agency. And then also the boundary that I'm also not going to use it to dismiss bad behavior or to make excuses for you or
Mm-hmm.
for myself. And so sort of keeping a check-in of where are you guys in the relationship and where are you yourself on that balance, on that triangle.
Is there something about kind of the information sharing either with your partner or, as we were talking earlier about kids, is there something about, like, hey, this is the kind of the context and maybe how the ground has shifted in the last 10 years. And so how you're feeling is understandable, or what you're wrestling with is coming from a cultural shift or a personal shift into this peak performance phase or season of life. Is there just something kind of informationally to equip your partner or adult, young men with, to understand the context of maybe where some of this tension or anxiety is coming from?
There two thoughts come to mind with that. One is that in this age that everyone talks about, where the social media, access to information, so many people I can compare myself with, and so some of the understanding that that allows of, hey, I get why the landscape is different today, that it's unparalleled in what it's been before. And so, because of that, an awareness to and sensitivity to the information that you consume,
Hmm.
how much of your brain is associated to visual processing, and therefore how much of everything that is in your visual awareness is significant to what you take in. Most of what you do is subconscious, so even the things that are subconsciously around you, the news feeds and the ads you think are not really impactful, or all of that, right? So what you take in. And then there's also I was doing a book signing recently, and I was talking about this section in the book that has a checklist of traits and behaviors of these high performing avoidant men. And a lot of them can be perceived as being negative. For example, you are very abrupt and blunt, and when I was a gentleman in the audience said, hey, a lot of those can be perceived as negative, and I'm curious how that's received, when people read it. And I said, you know what, the greatest irony is it is the part of the book that I get the strongest feedback from that population of, like, it was so refreshing. I felt so seen. And the gentleman said, even though you're pointing out these things that could be perceived as negative, and I said, yeah, because it's saying, hey, you are these things, but I understand and I get it. And you're really, it's if you're abrupt and blunt and whatever, it's not because you're a jerk. It's because your brain processes more quickly. So you don't understand that other people aren't keeping up with you, or, because you are emotionally sensitive, but you don't have the emotional maturity a lot of times to regulate that. And so you're really not this jerk and beast of a leader. And so the idea that they get to feel seen in that. So going back to your question, it's what are you consuming, what's around you, and then also how can you allow them to feel seen for their experience, not judged for it.
Yeah, yeah. I love the way you remove the negative intent from those behaviors. They're just a symptomatic behavior, not an intentional behavior. And then that releases some of that angst around it.
And then it's coupled with what I was saying about the lab triangle, that, hey, I get that you're these things and I can understand why you're these things, but there's an agency and there's a boundary, that doesn't excuse your behavior, but it empowers you to understand it so that you can improve it.
Got it. I
Mhm.
like that. I like that system a lot. It feels very like tactile and tangible to me, which I always need.
Especially if you're talking to somebody about emotions and behavior.
Yeah. And I don't have sons. Linsly has two young adult sons. And I guess the other thing that I worry, even having daughters, and I think this is actually, I know we're talking more about men today, but even looking at my daughters, like this idea of sense of community, and and I think having, watching even my dad age, and like he's always been super social and has a really good sense of community, which has really helped him. And my mom actually didn't have that, and it really was um it wasn't great for her, to be very honest. And I think it is part of the reason that she died before he did. But like looking at my husband and making sure that he has time and space to cultivate those relationships, because they are different, like I call Liz, I'm like, let's go for a walk or something. We tend to do things much more casually. But even as we're raising young men, how do we foster this idea that not only do you have people around you, but you actually learn how to talk to them? It's not sitting on the bar stool watching a game. And maybe that's okay. I guess that's what I'm like. how do these younger men actually learn how to have some of these conversations with their peers to create this community of support that I think women do a little bit more naturally?
I think getting practice doing that at home from an early age, ideally, so that it's less foreign for them to then do it, on the bar stool.
Yeah.
And then also that understanding that it may look a little different for men than it does for women. So theirs may come, while they are watching a game or at the batting range or on the golf course or something like that. But that allows them to have this like buffer that lets them feel safe diving into some deeper conversation. In an ideal world, hey, they would sit and face to face and have the eye contact and feel felt and with their buddy that they're talking to. But more often than not, it's going to be in that space of, at least as you try to get more comfortable with it, while it is engaged in something. But again, making it more familiar for them by having those conversations. And let's say, hey, you know what, we didn't start out doing that, we want to start doing that today. Great. But be open with your children about what you're doing so that they're not like, Mom, are you okay? Like, where's this coming from? Hey, I really, I feel like this is important and this is why, and this is what I'd like to try, to start doing, and love your support in it, and your partnership in it, have them be part of the process. Remember, love, agency, and boundaries. So the agency of, how does this, what does it look like for you to participate in these kinds of conversations?
Yeah, but I love that just kind of the explicit point, and Jen, as you raised it, I think for adult men, it's very hard to build community. The avenues for it just are not as readily available. I think for both of our partners, they have robust friendships from early in life, like in their 20s and in their 30s. But then when you shift gears and if you've either downshifted on the work world or your social life isn't there just aren't the easy avenues. And so it is a little tactical thing to say in the course of a week, how can I support my partner in finding the time and the activity and the group to go do that? Because it won't happen as organically, in my observation, with all men in our cohort. I mean, it's
Yeah.
just that they're great
Yep.
guys, but it just doesn't happen as organically as women.
Yep. And so if you can support fostering those engagements, if you're the one that's the better planner, if you're the one that, hey, how about you and so, go shoot some golf balls this weekend or something, or hey, I was going to go do something with his wife, and what about you guys? And if there are ways that you can nudge supporting that, because absolutely the isolation epidemic. It's, I mentor some young men and I hear it from them. And again, in particular, when you're on those ends of the spectrum of high performing or low performing, those become even harder for you.
Yeah, I think it also just comes down to a time reality. When you're a high performer, you're pretty engaged in that thing you're highly performing in. And it's just hard to carve out time to be doing something other than that, which would be building that community, if it's not part of your performance path.
And
So
especially when that thing that you are the ultra performer at, you're probably pretty good at, you get validation out of, you that positive feedback loop, it probably gives you your dopamine hit, etc. Whereas this thing about community and social and engagement and emotions is like, I'm not good at it, I don't even like it, I don't even have anyone, so you're not inclined to want to even try.
yeah. So I know we have a lot of female leaders who listen to this podcast. And so, we spend a lot of time talking about how we're developing the next generation of female leaders and, making sure that there are safe spaces for high performing women to connect and share and learn. I'm going to shift gears just a little bit more kind of back into the workplace. What do we need to be doing as high performing women in the workplace to be nurturing this next generation of male leaders as well? I think it's easy to focus on or I shouldn't say it's easy. It's easier and probably a little more comfortable for us to focus on the women because they've been left out of this conversation for a long time. And so the need feels really high. But I think we are seeing this shift as we have more women in leadership. Maybe we are not as thoughtful sometimes about including the developing men because we think they have what they need from a societal standpoint. what should we be doing as women to make sure that, as female leaders, to make sure that we are fostering and mentoring these younger men correctly so that they develop some of these skills as we go on and we just don't take it for granted?
I think the number one thing I would say is being mindful of how are you defining success and performance and what are you celebrating? And so if success and performance continues to get defined as ROI and hitting metrics and things like that, then in particular the male brain, and they process differently, and high performers process even more differently within that. So they're going to be inclined to want to push that forward. But if what you're how you're defining success is the way that they develop someone and the way that they lead and the way that they, made this group feel felt and understood for their experience and how they exercised empathy and what they did to really engage with their team and how did they create influence and impact and things like that, that if those are the markers that you're celebrating, the things that are harder to measure in ROIs and spreadsheets, then that is probably that redefining of success is probably one of the biggest gifts that you could give them.
I think in kind of a corollary to that, I was just trying to think off the top of my head. I don't know any. Maybe that's a little research project for us to do. Is if you were going to show examples or beacons to the younger men, or here's who's doing it well. It'd be wonderful to have kind of a list of people in the public arena who are known for this skill set. Who are the men
Yeah,
who
I
are
hadn't thought
leading?
about that.
Yeah.
Maybe because I can't think of any offhand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll have to take that as a homework project because there are plenty of them out there. And it's just like trying to raise awareness about that and celebrating that, and having a role model is so critical when you're trying to think about what you're developing in yourself.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I see it in the predominance of my clients where it's an executive who's just doing stellar in so many areas of performance and numbers and things like that, but ends up getting referred to work with me either by the board or themselves, or the challenges with their leadership team, or they fired half their leadership team, or things like that. Why? Because they have the markers for success that are in those tactical and performance arenas. But when it comes to engaging and influencing and inspiring and impacting and those things, connecting, which is more and more of the skill sets you need the higher up you go on the ladder, that's where then they run into trouble because they struggle, because that's the thing that they paid less attention to grind forward.
Yeah. Interesting. I want to go back to something that you just mentioned, just because we have been talking a lot about how the female brain is wired and we focus a lot of energy there. But will you go back and explain some of the differences of how the male brain approaches some of these things so we have a better understanding of that a little bit?
Sure. I think the main significance here is the analytical problem solving aspect, that they approach things from that problem solving mindset. You give them something and they want to know how to fix it, and then they want to analyze it. And so even if it is about emotions, or, hey, there's a challenge on this team, or so-and-so isn't getting along with so-and-so, or, hey, this person kind of needs some leadership development, they're going to look at it as, how do I analyze it and solve it, as opposed to how do I stop and connect and feel into what's required here. And their language doesn't even sound like some of the words that we're using here. And even if you said, hey, I'd like you to connect with this person on your team and really feel into what it is that they need, try to understand, what it would take to inspire them towards, greater development. And then you have them sort of, repeat that same sentiment back. It's not going to hold the same word choice as yours, because again, they don't think like that. So understanding that, and then when you are tasking them with talk about emotions and vulnerability and EQ and things like that, and it's not in their vocabulary, so you want me to look at something that's not the way my brain works, with vocabulary I don't have, and I'm not used to not being good at something, especially as a high performer, and I probably have imposter syndrome and a sensitive ego, all of which don't set up a good recipe for you, for me to succeed in that. And so if you bring your understanding to that dynamic, then as that female leader, how do you approach understanding this is how their brain works different. This is the intricacies that I'm dealing with, and how do I navigate that then to connect with them to allow them to sort of elevate into their best selves.
So one other thing that I know you mentioned in your book too is just some almost tactile tools that you teach that coach some of your clients to use. And I think they're pretty similar to some of the tools that we've talked about before. But I think that is almost, at least for me, if I have someone that's working for me, or even, interacting with my kids who are girls, but it doesn't really matter. Giving them these tools to help them kind of disengage for a second, refocus, become present, let go of some of the distraction to then again continue on, go forward. Can you tell us 2 or 3 of your favorite ones that you like to share? Because I think that is, whether we're raising the next generation or leading a team, us all having those skills of just, whoa, things are spinning. I need to I need to stop it. I need to reset. And the more of these that we can put in our tool chest, I think the more options we have, and the more that we can share with others on our team with maybe hopefully a tool that resonates with them.
Absolutely. And so I'll pick one tool, because if you do no other tool, take no other tool but this one, then it's a hit. Within that, I'll break it down. And actually on my website, you can download a PDF that gives you like all the information. Like it's literally something you can print out and put up on your wall, and it makes it easily accessible for you.
I love it.
And so the tool is called Setup. And so it is a tool that you can use to take inventory of what's affecting your decision making in any opportunity. And it's male, female, age agnostic, it doesn't matter what the situation is. It's anytime you're in a situation where you are making a decision. Anytime you are contemplating something, engaged with another person or not, just by yourself, it doesn't matter. So the S is for your somatics. And your somatics is your body awareness. So the sensations from your physical body are like a whole other data set we often leave out. So exercises and tools that I talk about to grow your somatic awareness. What does tightness in my shoulders mean? What does knots in my stomach mean? What does tension in my throat mean? And so that's somatic awareness. The E is for your emotions. What do I feel about what's happening here? The T is for your thoughts. So what are the thoughts that are coming to mind? The U is for your universe. What else is happening in your universe? Are you excited about going on vacation? Did you just get in a fight with a loved one? Are you stressed out because a car almost, hit you on your way to work? And the P is for your physiology. And so that is, are you hungry? When was your last bowel movement? How well did you sleep? All of these things that are affecting you all day, every day as you move through space. And so let's say you are in a board meeting or in a leadership meeting, and someone says something and you have a reaction to it, or you have to make a critical decision, or you're contemplating whether you should fire someone. In any of those dynamics, if you think that the only thing affecting your decision is the data right in front of you, you're so wrong. As opposed to if you say, okay, hang on a second, I'm about to make this decision, fire this person, hire this person, whatever it is. What physical sensations in my body? What do I feel about what's happening right now? What thoughts are coming to mind? What else is in my universe? And what's my physiology? I now am able to take this rapid inventory and make a more comprehensive decision, even if all the other boxes check out fine, but at least you're able to make a more comprehensive decision. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you guys have heard about this famous study they did where the judges, the sentences that they would hand out, before lunch or after lunch, mm-hmm. right? Yes. So that's a perfect example of setup, the decisions they made and the effect of the U, the P in their physiology, their blood sugar, or whatever, right? So it's if you did nothing else but learn setup, I promise you it would make a difference.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think probably to some people that sounds like a big list, like anything, you got to practice it and get it fine tuned where you can just go beep, 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 beep. All right, I've kind of scanned, done, ready to move on.
Yeah. Exactly. it just becomes so automatic that before you are about to make a decision, react to someone, react to being triggered, right before you're about to do that, you, through practice, then stop yourself and say, hold on a second. Let me just see how much of whatever I just got triggered about, or I'm about to go off on, my VP or something is really about that, or what else is going on.
Yeah. So if we were to say, and Jen, I loved how you were holding up Layla's book, if you want to hold that up again, but if we were to say, okay, hey, partner, kiddo, here's a great book. I think you would enjoy it and, have a read. And then they're excited and they're kind of adopting a lot of the tactical things in here. What will be different? Like what do we want to put on their horizon for them about how they might feel or how they might interact and engage with the world? Like, what is the payoff for doing the work?
Great question. That you will have optimized your choices, understand why you do what you do, and have greater mastery over your emotions. So you get to be the architect of your story rather than have it written for you. You get to understand why you're doing what you're doing rather than just sort of being reactive to everything.
I love that positioning that you get to be the architect of your story. It's just right there. Awesome. Well, I know we're going to be kind of running up against our endpoint here, and I want to make sure that people know where to find you, and you have a chance to tell anything in addition to your book that you want to put on people's radar. So that it's such high impact and broad work.
Appreciate that. Really, I would say just referring them to the website, Work with Leila, Leila.com. And if they do nothing else, please download this PDF off of the website so that they can use it with any age, any person, any gender in the world, because I really believe that it makes a difference. And then connect with me on LinkedIn. I use my LinkedIn most actively.
Awesome.
Awesome.
And the book, The Heart of Peak Performance, Emotional Mastery for High Performing Men. I took a ton of pearls away from this book as well. So I think it has a target audience, but it can be much broader than that. And then I think we try to kind of re-summarize things for people that maybe have a shorter attention span than the 45 minutes that we provide. I really liked these 3 points that I think it's important for us as leaders, as parents, as partners, that we can't expect someone else to go where we haven't gone. And so modeling that behavior and especially that vulnerability, I think, I even look at how I talk to my kids or my partner or my team at work. I sometimes expect them to give me information that I haven't been willing to share with them first, or expect them to open up about a situation where I haven't shared my feelings around it. And so I think that is a beautiful thing. And then I love, and I forget this. I think I forget this often in society where everything is measured. And, like I have a track athlete, like all that matters is what's on the clock. So it's like redefining or simply defining what we mean by success. And when there are grades or test scores or times or profits or all of these things that can be very easily analyzed, especially as a high performer. We are all high performers. And that is how I defined myself it's probably still how I define myself, if I'm being perfectly honest, is, I want to be the fittest one in the gym. It doesn't matter what environment I am in. If I don't feel like I'm the best, I feel like I'm automatically failing, which is ridiculous with the fortunate people I get to surround myself with who are amazing. I'm like, I should never be the best, nor am I. But I think that, you always have that mindset. And so I think it is so helpful to say, what is really success? And I think as we get older, maybe that gets a little bit easier, but I look at my kids and success is very black and white. It is getting this grade. It is getting into this college. It is doing these things that we know is not going to define them the rest of their lives. But I just think that is powerful. And Linz, I don't know if you want to add anything there. I don't want to just keep babbling.
Well, I do love
Before
that.
you add anything, Lindsay, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's something really critical you said here. Is you said, "Hey, at everything I do," when you talked about that. And so I think, in particular for high performers, it's important to understand that asking you not to do that is very counterintuitive. It is ingrained in the way that your brain processes information. So for me to just say, "Hey, Jen, stop being that way," that's not the way. It's to say, hey, I understand you're this way. Here's why you're this way. Here's how that shows up. And here, these other things that we're talking about are not to take away from that. They're simply to enhance that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that the practicality of it, because you get a chance to do this a lot in parenting, is if you're wired one way and you want to rewire, which is what we're talking about, right? So it's neuroplasticity, it's that 3-to-1 ratio. Like you've got to over celebrate the process instead of the outcome, the team outcome instead of the individual, whatever it is that you're defining in that success, and then sign up to do the work behaviorally to overemphasize it, because you can't rewire with a 1-to-1.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then just be the architect of your own story. Like, I think we get lost and we want, I sometimes I'm like, well, gosh, am I really in control driving the ship, or am I responding to what external expectations are of me? And I think that it is, as a high performer, easy to get lost into that trap. Easy to say that is a balanced equation, and instead of saying, what do I, let me design my story and define my success, all of these things back to, that add up, I guess.
And I think if you asked yourself, one question as you made different choices and sort of move through different spaces, is just asking yourself, okay, am I at peace right now? That you can be an ultra high performer and be at peace, or you can be an ultra high performer and be a wreck while you're doing it. Both are possible.
Yeah. So one thing really quick, but I know we were kind of wrapping up, but that just brought up one. What is your, finishing up? Because I know that I have felt this way personally as a high performer. I know many other high performers that do this. When we really start to implement some of these things, there's this nagging little voice, at least I have it, that says, you're failing because I'm choosing to do other things. And I can now at least identify that voice and kind of tame it. But what's your one piece of advice for people who are really trying to take these steps of defining success for themselves, making themselves the architect of their own story? But sometimes that means letting go of characteristics and traits and behaviors that have made them very successful, and that have created opportunity for external praise and feedback and encouragement. And I mean, I'll give my example. When I decided to leave clinical medicine, the first question I got every single time was, well, what happened? What'd you do? I'm like, nothing. There was not a catastrophic event that triggered this. Like, I wanted to go do something different. And no one could believe I had just made that decision from my own place and my own wanting to be the architect of my own story, that, this has really served me. It's not serving me in the way it used to. And so I'm willing to move on. And all of a sudden, everybody wanted this dramatic catastrophe to be the reason that was happening.
I think that the more you center yourself through, whether it's things you need to heal, growing your self-awareness, finding where your compass of peace is, the more you get to your centered self, the more making decisions that don't necessarily jive with society maybe become easier to make, because you become so solid in your own centering that those other voices don't sway you. Whereas when you are not as centered in your own self, the outside influences and voices and opinions and all of that are so much more likely to sway you, so that you are like, oh my God, you're failing. Why did you do this? You're such an idiot, or how could you have whatever, or, whereas again, when you come back to your own center, that is what you ground yourself in, not in the tides of outside voices, because they always exist. And high performers are used to being scrutinized because they perform so well, they draw attention. Then when something happens, they draw attention.
Yeah. Well, I think entering on finding our center is beautiful. And thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. Thank you for sharing your book. We'll make sure book and website are connected in show notes and every place else. And thanks for your time.
Thank you both so much. It was such a pleasure. I feel like I could talk to you all for hours. Yes. And if you pick up the book on Amazon, please leave a review. I would be really grateful. I'd love
Absolutely.
Yes. Thank you for your work.
Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show, and we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.